What are the stakes here? I want to ask you, given that the revenue plan, perhaps now we fall back on this doomsday budget, the so-called doomsday budget, where do things stand now?
Well, let's keep three things in mind, if you will. Over the last 4 very difficult years, we have made cut after cut after cut. So the cumulative amount of cuts is about $7.5 billion in cuts over my term in office. That's more cuts than any governor since the Great Depression has had to make. Second point, when this budget was submitted, it was balanced. When my administration, with the 8-9 months to prepare it, submitted it, it was a balanced budget proposal. And part of that balancing was the cutting of about $800 million, 250 of which was the pension sharing, but the rest were cuts. So on top of that, we now have been left by the legislature with another $500 million in cuts. Those cuts would happen and would hit public education. So as school boards try to put together their budgets, which they usually zero in on once the legislature's done, as county executives Rusher and Baker and Ike Leggett with their councils put together their local budgets, they are going to see much larger holes in their budget because of what the General Assembly failed to do in the budget they enacted. The thought in the final hours was that we would have a balanced approach of cuts and some revenues. In this case, the compromise was the House version, which would call upon roughly 15% of Maryland filers in the top earning categories to pay a little more in their income tax so that we could continue to have #1 public schools, more affordable college, and safer streets. They failed to do that, and that's where we stand right now.
Now, earlier this week, I spoke with Senate President Mike Miller, and he called the House approach class warfare was the term he used. We often hear that type of language coming from Republicans on the national scene, but that idea of keeping the tax increase to the upper revenue earners, he had called class warfare. How far apart, in your estimation, are the two houses? I mean, given that you're all in the same party, what's the divide here?
It's funny, sometimes I've talked to people who have served in other states as governors, and some of them have said to me, it's trickier when your own party's in control. And certainly this week that would appear to be the case. I don't think they're that far apart. I'll tell you what they've always been far apart on is the issue of gambling. It has been a difficult issue for both of these gentlemen, both of whom I respect. They both have very strongly held feelings, and those feelings are exactly opposite of one another. And so when we inject into the final 10 days of the budget session an insistence from one side of the State House that gambling be included in any compromise, it crowded out some other important things that we weren't able to get to, one of them being transportation funding. Kind of fell off the radar screen of both houses in the end there, and it's too bad because I think there had been a lot of good public discussion about the need to invest in our infrastructure. On the more positive side, if I may,
sure.
We did pass a capital budget. We are one of only 8 states that has a AAA bond rating. And that capital budget supports about 50,000 jobs. We're going to be able to do more in terms of our wastewater infrastructure because of an expansion of the flush fee, flush tax, and that investment, which helps the Bay. Passed important legislation on stormwater, important legislation to curb the sort of septic sprawl that's by its very nature polluting of eventually our waterways and our aquifers and our streams. So while there was a lot that was accomplished, the budget compromise disintegrated in that last half hour, and we hope to get it back on track. We may or may not. It could well be if the two houses are not able to reach a consensus, then school boards and counties may have to live with these deep cuts, and all of us will be reminded of the degree to which things like public safety and public education and affordable college are shared responsibilities here in Maryland.